Welcome back to Stars and Myths. In most parts of the world, myth and legend recount a time when the sky and earth were in close proximity or even sometimes in contact. Let us look at some ancient examples. In ancient Egypt, Shu the air separated the sky not from the earth gap. Ancient stories are also found in Mesopotamia, China, India, and among the Maya and Aztecs. In ancient Greece, the sky Uranus and the earth Gaia were united until Cronus separated them. The Greek myth was also known to the ancient Romans. According to Cicero, the Romans explicitly identified their god Saturn with the Greek Cronus. However, as the myth was transferred to Rome, the symbolism changed with time. The Romans progressively altered the violent aspect of the Greek sickle's use to emphasize its agricultural purpose as a harvesting tool. Here's a distribution map of the Low Sky Motif. The motif is almost universal. In the last two episodes, we identified mythological hotspot by looking at the pattern on the map. We showed how in some large region, cosmological motifs appear as interconnected group of motifs exhibiting significant similarities. The question today is the following. Can we actually trace this motif and determine their origin or their age? We'll investigate this aspect and illustrate the most significant pitfalls of comparative mythology in dating and tracing the origin of myths. Let's first focus on the Low Sky Motif in the Pacific Ocean. In this example, historical and archaeological evidence allow us to confirm the direction of the motif's propagation from Asia to Polynesia. This map shows the big picture. Between 3000 BC and 1000 BC, seafarers from Taiwan traveled to the Philippines. In the 13th century, their descendants populated New Zealand. Ancient DNA studies reveal significant and multiple admixture with Papuan-related groups and subsequent migration to Polynesia. Now, regarding the propagation of myths and dating, it's important to determine whether there were further migration or intensive long-range contacts. Indeed, assuming that motifs propagate between neighbors, dating a motif requires estimating the first and the last proven chain of contact between these regions. Using the first contact leads to overestimating the motif's age. Searching for the last chain of contact before European arrival is a very difficult task. Archaeology provides some clues about how and when the chain may have been broken. According to studies, the long-range transport of obsidian from the Bismarck archipelago northeast of Papua New Guinea to near and remote Oceania significantly diminished in the early 1st millennium BC. And it provides a possible chronological marker for the interruption of the continuous chain of contact. This approach allows us to estimate that the Low Sky Motif enters this network probably between 3000 BC and the beginning of the 1st millennium BC. The estimate assumes that the chain of contact was not later reestablished, an assumption we cannot verify. And let's also emphasize that the suggested time range is based on an inference. The decrease in exchange is a proxy for reduced narrative contact, not a proof of motif timing. Even if long-distance Obsidian exchange declines, occasional journeys, marriage, networks, or other exchanges could still transmit stories. This example demonstrates that while a date range can be estimated, it necessitates looking beyond initial migration. This step is sometimes overlooked even by academic literature. Let's now look at the trail between Africa and Asia. Here we'll discuss a combination of motifs found in stories about the sky being low and being touched by a pestle which caused the angry sky to rise. For this specific Africa-Asian connection, archaeological or historical information doesn't help pinpoint either the direction or the age. There are too many possible hypotheses. The sky and earth often separate after a pestle hits the low sky, and we see here as a distribution. The story is told along a band stretching from West Africa to Melanesia on 2 continents. On the map, traditions with the pestle motif are marked with red dots. In Africa, the story is often complemented by the edible sky motif. This specific combination is shown with magenta dots. If the edible sky motif appears on its own, then it's marked with blue dots. Let me tell you a West African story about the edible sky. There was a time when the sky was close to the earth. People could cut off pieces of the sky. Often they cut off more than they could eat and threw it away. Heaven warned that it would punish the people. Nevertheless, a greedy woman cut off a huge piece, called her husband and the whole village. They could not finish it. As a punishment, heaven rose. From that moment on, people had to work hard to obtain their food. Can we figure out where this idea of eating the sky came from? The edible sky represents a world of foraging, where food is abundant and free. The pestle, conversely, is a tool associated with the processing of grain and the necessity of hard labor. The combined story in Africa can be interpreted as explaining the transition from foraging to agriculture, to cultivation. In Asia, the story is more about the sky, how the sky got separated, either with a pestle or by a giant. So now let's address the main question. Can we determine the origin of these motifs based on their coherence, for instance? Indeed, the Finnish school often relied on the assumption that an original story travels and slowly loses coherence. If one applies this hypothesis here, the African story would have traveled to Asia because it's more coherent. Now, let's turn to the internet to test this classical hypothesis. The internet allows testing the process of story formation in real time, and we will see that sometimes story gain coherence over time, contrary to the Finnish school classical assumption. A perfect example is the collaborative creation of the Backrooms on the internet. This image was first posted in 2019 on the internet with a comment, "Post disquieting image that just feel off." A user posted a story about the image. It starts like this: "If you are not careful and you clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the backrooms with nothing but the stink of old moist carpet." In video game, no clips mean moving through walls and boundaries as if they aren't there. Over time, the story became increasingly complex, and the coherence of the different stories improved. It was never a stable, complex, and coherent story at the beginning, just an embryo of millions of possible stories. 2020, 3 years later, a free video series called The Backrooms appeared online. Now, a Hollywood movie is scheduled in 2026. If the movie is successful, it will become the most consistent and stable version globally. What we see here online is probably quite similar to what happened thousands of years ago. Many small, messy versions gradually turning into one stable story. And here are the main references if you want to dig into that topic. See you next time. Bye bye.